Hello and welcome to our second video on BD with Stephen Revell. Stephen is founder and CEO of Making Change Happen, and he is a former partner with Freshfields. Stephen, a very warm welcome to LawWiser.
Thank you very much, Aman. It's nice to be back and talking to you again.
And today we will be discussing a very practical aspect of business development, and very often this become a contentious issue as well, but we will be taking all those questions head on. And today's topic is how to optimize the BD team efforts to maximize results for the law firm and the relationship between the BD team and the partners within the firm. Stephen, let me start with a very basic question. What should be the ratio of BD professionals in an ideal world in a law firm? I mean, BD firm to lawyers, what should be the ideal ratio actually?
Well, it's an extremely good question, and maybe one way of answering it is to say, if you can tell me the length of a piece of string, I can give you the ratio. Because there is no right answer. I think most law firm leaders probably underestimate how many business development professionals could make a real difference. They think, oh, we've got a couple of BD people, we've sorted BD. And I think actually the real answer to the question is to properly sit down and evaluate what you're trying to achieve as a law firm in terms of business development, what the expectation of partners is, what the partners need to do, and therefore what business development support is needed. So I think for many firms, and business development is in a sense cyclical. People see it at different points in the business cycle, have different views on it. It's too big, it's too small. But I think what's needed in most firms is almost a blank piece of paper approach, because I think as business development has developed within law firms, we've actually reached a point in many firms where they've lost their way. In a sense, business development aren't quite sure what their mandate is, and often from the partner's perspective, there's a whole series of unrealistic expectations from too few people. I need this doing, is the cry. And, I need it tomorrow because I've got a meeting that I forgot to tell you about. And, you've got a couple of people who are already in the middle of doing something. That's just unrealistic. But unfortunately, the consequence of it is at the next partners meeting, that partner says, oh, BD are useless. They never produce what I need. So I think we've got unhappiness of both sides of an equation. We've got unhappy partners because they're not sure what their role is, and I'll come back to that. And they're not sure that business development are producing what they need.
Yeah.
And on the business development side, particularly as many firms have if I can put it in these terms, thrown more money at the problem. They've hired more expensive people thinking that that's the fix. You've actually got in some law firms, some really smart, some really good business development people that are being underused or given menial tasks, or even worse, being killed by statistics. I need reports on this, reports on that. And actually reporting is taking over from action. And one of the things I always used to bang about, it's about action, not lists. Don't stop writing lists, get on with it. Go and meet some clients. So I think actually resetting the baseline for both sides. What do we want partners to do? And my view is partners need to be at the forefront of business development. They're the ones that need to be talking to the clients, but to do more of that and to do it better, they need strong support from good business development. And once you've defined those roles, I think you can define the right numbers. Okay. I think there's also an empowerment question. I think too many business developments, even the head of business development, feels powerless in the face of a partner saying, do this. And actually, you need to empower the head of business development to be able to say to partner A, no, because that's actually a waste of time. You asked me to do it last year, you did nothing with it, the client never gives us any work. I'm too busy to do that because I'm prioritizing my team's efforts for partner B, who's pursuing a client who will give us some work. And the trouble is, partners don't like that, but they need to be educated that if you're investing in good business development people, they need to be able to work for the firm at large, not individual partners, to get the best results. So I'm afraid I'm ducking the answer, but I'm actually reinforcing the need to think more carefully about the numbers than many, many firms do.
I think you've actually touched upon very, very pertinent issues that practically exist in law firms. And but let me just put it this way: that in a big law firm, let me just put together some put forward some roles of what BD team can play. One could be that business development planning and basically hand-holding practice leaders and putting together tracking mechanisms so that whether things are going in the right direction or not. Identification of market opportunities, RFP support, submissions, public relations, social media, all those things. And in fact, one thing that you've talked about that, I think one model which is being used by Big Four particularly is that they have your BDMs, they are business development managers, and I think that concept came just to break the silos within the organization. So supposing I'm a tax partner, I will go and sell only tax, and I'm an M&A partner and I'm going to sell only M&A, and I'm not too sure whether I should be introducing X partner, Y partner or not, despite of knowing that my client would need that. Now, instead of that, some of the Big Four have actually started using this concept of BD managers who, irrespective of the service line, they go out in the market, they seek work, and they come and do backward integration. So, for example, if there's a manager in say education sector, he will go and meet up with all clients in education sector, and he will assess that this client needs this work, this client needs that work, and then they will go back. Now, that is another role that doesn't exist at the moment within the law firm. So this question I'm keeping for later, but let me just ask my first question first. That considering that we have a team which is involved in business development, planning, tracking, support, RFP submissions, doing everything that is needed for a law firm of say 500 lawyers. Let me ask you that question once again. How many people would you need? Like 10% of lawyers? That's a good average that I have seen statistically globally, which is being followed. But what's your practical advice on this?
No, I think that's as good a number as any once you've reached that size of law firm, not least because of the point you made about cross-selling. And I'm a very firm believer that one of the rationales for being in a firm, as opposed to being a sole practitioner, is the fact that you've got colleagues both to work with, but also to provide in aggregate a better service to the clients. And therefore, I'm a strong believer in cross-selling. I'm a strong believer that business development groups have a really important role to play and need to be seen as a firm resource rather than some sort of, oh, that BD is for that team, or even worse, that partner. So seeing business development as part of the firm's glue, I think is really important, and it's a great role they can play. I think the other point that you just mentioned, again, I'm a strong believer in. Many firms are moving quite rightly to a sector approach because it enables them to understand their clients better and to deliver better advice. But one of the consequences of a sector approach is even more need to be integrated in the advice you provide, which needs cross-selling, needs the involvement of other departments. So that if you are, in the pharma sector group and you're talking to your big pharma clients, they may have a litigation problem, an IP problem, a corporate problem, a tax problem. And you need to make sure, for the benefit of the firm, that they understand the strengths of the firm in all those areas. And again, BD can play a really important role of preparing a partner to have a good conversation. I was just listening to a radio program as I drove back for this discussion, and it was all about meetings. We have far too many meetings, and that includes client meetings. And the conclusion really was, in any meeting, there are two simple rules. You need to give it a purpose, and to give it a purpose, you need to be prepared. And I think that really summarizes how business development can support partners to have meetings with purpose in which they go into well prepared. Because for me, and I'm now going to answer your question about priorities, the first priority is about client relationships. Because without clients, you don't really have a law firm. Yes, you need people, you need good lawyers, but without clients, nobody's paying the bills. So having as their primary purpose supporting partners in building strong client relationships and cross-selling to them is really important. Now, I accept there's some tracking that goes with that, but the tracking has to be secondary to actually making sure partners are going out well prepared for good meetings with clients, in particular cross-selling, but more generally to show understanding of that client. And that's where I think a really good business development group can not only prove its worth, but also really help grow revenue in the firm, because they are doing some of the research for the partner, feeding the partner with, these are the issues the client's worried about, these are the threats to its sector, and this is what we can offer. And therefore the partner is fully prepared. So in terms of my priorities of your list, the first one is client relationships and tracking, and that could be 50% of their time as far as I'm concerned. It's by far the dominant purpose. Secondly, and it kind of goes along with that, identification of market opportunities, as you described it, but to your client base. Not, oh, if we had a client in the pharma industry, we could go and talk to them about this. If you've no clients in the pharma industry and not trying to development, that's a waste of everybody's time. So really focused opportunity spotting, again, allied with good meetings with clients, extremely valuable. Thirdly, I think I would put RFP support. We're in a world where many clients rely on RFP or procurement processes, and law firms need to take those seriously, whether they like them or not. And again, you can have separate departments, separate pitch teams, but overall, I'm of the view that actually keeping all forms of business development into a single group leads to many benefits. It means you've got people who aren't bored because all they're doing is churning out pitches. You've got people with different experience bringing different ideas to bear on pitches. So I'm a fan of keeping everybody in the same group. And then fourthly, we could debate the value of directories till the proverbial cows come home, but clients do look at directories. Other law firms do look at directories. And therefore, for many firms, directory presence is important, and they ignore it at their peril, particularly as life becomes more cross-border. So again, taking directory submissions seriously, I think, is something business development does. But again, not scattergun. What are our strengths? Let's be number one in our 5 strengths, rather than number 3 across everything, and therefore nobody's paying us attention. So really focused approach to directories, again, good value add from business development.
So my question to you, Stephen, is that do you think directories are still very relevant? Because if I remember correctly, there was a time when there was no internet, or there was very poor access to internet. But now people are very well networked. Word of mouth actually that goes around. How relevant are the directories in today's time?
No, very good question. I mean, I'm a big fan of networks, and I talk a lot about building networks, not necessarily becoming a member of one of the established networks, Lex Mundi, Terralex, whatever, because typically they are one law firm per country. So for many countries, India is a great example. There's no space in those networks anymore, those formal networks. So for many firms, it's about building their own networks. And again, for the larger firms, I think that's really important. I'd probably change my view on directories 6 or 7 times over my career. I think my current thinking is people are still looking at them. Clients are looking at them. Other law firms are looking at them. But, particularly with regard to countries where the number of transactions being done is increasing. And again, I think India is a good example. Everybody can name the top 4 or 5 law firms in India. But actually, if it's a smaller matter, or all of them are conflicted in some way, very few law firms know the second tier in India well. I mean, I'm generalizing, but therefore people would go to the directories. Who's in the directory? So yes, people are not, I can remember when I had 6 or 7 directories on my shelf in my office. Nobody does that anymore. It's using directories online, so it's moved with the internet. I think, interestingly, I think it's put even sharper focus on law firms' websites, because what I do when I'm looking, to see what firm's doing what, I might go and have a look at the directories and see, well, who's the leading firm in tax in India at the moment, according to the directories? And does that tally with what else I know? Oh, now let me click on the website of one of those firms and learn a bit more about them. So in short, having changed my mind a few times over my career, I think directories do have some value. And that's in part, I think, 2 things about directories. There's less of them, and therefore it's more accessible. And secondly, I think the directories have got better at providing some value judgment. The old stories was, if you took the right person out to lunch, you could get to number 1. I think that's of the past. They're now doing some decent research, talking to clients, and trying to come up with a good view on the leading firms for any particular practice in any particular jurisdiction. So I think and again, it depends a bit on the firm and the countries, but I think most firms in most countries need to take directories seriously, but they need to be organized and they need to be efficient.
Yeah. Okay. Now, coming back to the earlier question where we talked about the priorities that the BD team should actually have in terms of supporting their partners. As a managing partner, or as a leader of the firm, if somebody is going and hiring these BD professionals, what according to you should be the qualifications or the background of these people? Now, these are very practical questions, Stephen, because these are the things that one looks at when people are instructing their hiring managers or agents in the market. I think that's where it plays a huge role.
It's again, it's an extremely good question, and as you say, a very, very practical issue. And again, it's changed enormously, over the period I've been in practice. I remember when we started taking business development more seriously and hiring people to help. And I remember the first 2 hires, had been in industry. And I distinctly remember a conversation around a table. Somebody was joining us from Procter & Gamble. And the conversation deteriorated very quickly because everyone said, legal services are not soap powder. This person won't be able to help us. And there was this very fixed view almost that unless you were a lawyer, you couldn't be a good business development person to sell business services. And I think that's evolved enormously. And it's evolved enormously because I think law firms are rightly looking at the full range of professional services. So getting people that have maybe been in the Big Four or other accountants or the McKinseys of the world in business development roles. So there's much greater talent that already has professional services experience. And again, I think lawyers, I won't say all lawyers, have realized that yes, law is a very special profession, but in terms of the client relationship, it isn't rocket science versus other professional services firms. And therefore, there's a much broader pool of talent available now. And certainly people shouldn't just be looking at, well, have you worked for a law firm before? I think that doesn't rule out those people, because there are now a growing number of people that have worked in law firms, and clearly that experience is relevant. I also think there's a much greater acceptance that somebody that has worked in Procter & Gamble has some value to add. And yes, they may need to learn about the product in their terminology, but law is a different product, as indeed is all professional services. But some of the, particularly when one's looking at tracking and looking at methodologies, there's some real value to be added by people that have had, if you like, client-side experience. You know, they've actually been in the client that we're now trying to advise and, in a sense, sell services to. And thirdly, I think there are some great examples of lawyers who've become great business development people. And I think for lawyers who, for whatever reason, whether it's a career break, whether it's, you know, they like the law firm, but they don't like the practice of law, you know, if you can find somebody like that who wants to learn business development and help create a strong business development group, they're also great hires. But, you know, how often do we talk to our lawyer community about, have you thought of joining our business development group? You know, but it may be a win-win for everybody. So I think it is important to see business development as a group of people that have strong skill sets, and then to use those skill sets in an organized way. And therefore, you need to attract people to your firm with the right skill sets. And I think be broad-minded about what their experience has been, rather than, you know, I only want a lawyer, or I only want somebody who's worked in a law firm. You've got a much bigger pool of talent to fish in, and therefore most law firms should.
Okay, now I think that's a pretty good lowdown, and I think uh, a lot to kind of, you know, draw on for, you know, when somebody is actually going and hiring. And I think, you know, there is a talent pool available. It's just that you have to figure out who's the right person. And so now let me ask you another question. I mean, we've talked about the expectations of partners from a BD team, and so what are the three things that you would say that partners should bear in mind to get optimal results from their BD teams? I mean, some practical advice, practical tips for the partners, you know, in law firms.
So I think my list for the sort of the partner side, I'm probably going to repeat the point I've been banging on about: clarity of the role. You know, understanding what you as a lawyer are meant to do and what support you can get from business development. So that's the first thing many partners need to just pause and think about. I think secondly is the clarity and timeliness of the requirements. You know, I have a meeting this afternoon. Can you give me, you know, blah, 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 blah. Is no way to prepare for a meeting, you know, particularly with an important client. It's, I've got a meeting coming up in 2 weeks' time. What do you think my agenda should be? What am I trying to position this firm to that client? And what background materials could you help me pull together? That conversation, and it probably ought to be a conversation, not just an email, needs to be happening well in advance, so that business development can really add value. And I think my third point for the partner is, you can't abrogate responsibility for business development just because you've got a business development group. That's not the end of your job in terms of client relationship building and business development. You've still got an important role. You can't just delegate and abrogate to a business development group. And then I guess if I look at it from the other side, you know, what would be my three things for business development? I'm going to have the same number one. You know, as a business development group, have clarity on the role, because you're always going to underperform unless there is that clarity. Secondly, I think too many business development groups, partly because sometimes they're just too busy, don't give thoughtful background. The times when I've asked for some prep for a meeting and I'm old-fashioned, I print stuff out, and I end up with an 1.5 inches thick of paper that I don't read because they've
Yeah.
given me too much, rather than the proverbial one-pager that says, here are the key things. So I think much more focused on accepting partners are busy, they want background, but one of the key roles of business development is to distill that background into really usable information. And then I think the third point is, accepting that you perform the best role by getting the best information and best thoughts to the partner who's going to be the delivery mechanism. And rather than being frustrated that it works like that, embracing that and making sure you're putting all your energy into getting the right information to the partner. And then having done so, nag him. The most frustrating thing for business development is they do some good work, they see a real prospect, and the partner sits on it. Now, sometimes it can be that they've done the wrong work for the wrong client, for the wrong partner. But oftentimes it's the partner's too busy or thinks he or she is too busy to do it. So as business development, go and nag that partner. In a sense, force him to go out and use that material. Because, as I say, for it to work, it takes both sides of that equation, the partner and the business development professional. Don't let energy go to waste.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering the question which I didn't ask, which I was about to ask. I think it is also very important for BD professionals to know how to optimally perform for the organization. Now, let me ask you my last question, which is that what is your message for managing partners on business planning and the creation of a cohesive team for a smooth implementation of BD planning in the firm and implementation of that planning?
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a very simple answer that I think applies to about 70% of law firms. Start again. So rather than just, oh, let's hire one more because that will make a difference, go back to a blank piece of paper, get clear buy-in as to what the partners need to do, and then define the support you need, and therefore the resources you need to provide that support. But in many law firms, you've probably got a business development group that aren't very happy and aren't being well used. So go back to basics, test what you need, and then see if you've got it and how you deliver it if you've not.
Okay, so basically to sum up, everything that you said is basically, first of all, it is very important for the firm to have a complete clarity on what do they expect out of BD team, complete clarity on partners, what they're looking for from BD team, clarity on part of BD professionals themselves, that what adds value and what should they do. And last but not the least, a very robust planning, and that is the key to implement everything as far as the BD is concerned.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I haven't talked about, sort of lists very much. I've been critical of them, if anything. We're too focused on lists rather than action, and that does worry me. But I think an important function is this tracking and analysis. And often BD do a good job at some of the basics, but it needs to be carefully joined together with revenue information. Who are our most important clients by revenue, and have we got the right relationships with them? That should be one of the basic questions that a BD team helps with, by prioritizing the biggest generators of revenue, because typically, as we all know, it's much easier to get more work out of existing clients than new work out of new clients.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that is the cheapest way of business development, and that's the easiest way of business development, but that requires planning, and that requires a lot of cohesiveness in the team and collaboration. And I think that is going to be a winning combination for any law firm that adopts something like this. Thank you
Agree
so much.
completely.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephen, for your views on this, for very practical tips on business development. And I hope it is going to be extremely useful for all the managing partners, all the partners, and all the BD folks who are listening to this conversation. Thank you once again, Stephen, for being on LawWiser.
Very nice talking to you again, Aman. And I hope, as in all parts of the world, we're beginning to return to a normality. And I see India is getting better and better by the day.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Let's hope so. And the world should become the way it was pre-COVID, and those barriers are broken. And all the best to you, Stephen.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.